Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. This week, Representative Pramila Jayapal of Washington State, a Democrat. Jayapal chairs the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She was previously a civil rights activist and made history as the first Indian American woman to serve in the House of Representatives. Welcome to you, Representative Jayapal, and it's been a few years since we spoke, so we're thrilled to get you back here.
Well, thank you so much, Bonnie, for having me. I'm delighted to be with you.
And when we did speak last, you had recently taken over the Progressive Caucus. How do you balance that and stay in in the good graces of the president, who is taking hits from progressives left and right?
Well, Bonnie, the Progressive Caucus is almost 100 members strong. We're over 40% of the Democratic caucus. We've continued to grow and build our power. And we were out there fighting for the president's agenda. And the president has been very clear with me about how much he appreciates that. I don't think there's been a bigger champion, frankly, for the president's agenda other than the president himself, in terms of what we were trying to push forward. And I should be clear that the fact that he is pushing for these bold, populist, progressive, transformational ideas comes, of course, from the progressive movement that has continued to build over the last many years. But in reality, he is advocating for and putting forth to the people of the United States from the very powerful bully pulpit of the White House what I think is the most progressive agenda we've seen yet. So I'm thrilled to be fighting with him and for the same things that he laid out to us in Congress a year ago when he came and addressed Congress in March of 2021. We have been able to do a tremendous amount, thanks to progressives as well, supporting this agenda. And I wish we had been able to get Build Back Better done as well. That it wouldn't have passed the House if it hadn't been for progressives. But I think obviously we have very tight margins in the Senate, and we are trying to figure out what we can still get done. But let's not forget how much has happened thanks to progressives. Stimulus checks in people's pockets that fundamentally changed the way people were able to weather the pandemic. Shots in arms, the American Rescue Plan, a $1.9 trillion package that was incredibly progressive, plus the biggest investment in transportation, not just roads and bridges, but also things that are very important to progressives like EV networks and electric grid work and public transit, all of these things that progressives have been pushing for so long. And the work we still have to do is substantial. And we're working with the president, with the White House, and pushing on the Senate to try to get those things done as well.
Well, why then is his approval rating as low as it is in the depending on which poll you read, maybe in the 40s, some as low as high 30s? What is that about? And especially with two now very strong unemployment rate reports coming out showing that the unemployment rate in this country is pretty low.
Yes, I mean, it's really stunning. We've created over 7 million new jobs in just 13 months. We've cut hunger by 32%. We've cut child poverty in half. But Bonnie, I think COVID is taking its toll on people. I think it has been a rough 2 years with COVID. And I think it has been difficult for people to see the end to all of that. And so I think that's part of it. I also think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Republicans who criticize the president every single day vote no on these bills like the American Rescue Plan, and the vast majority of them voted no on the infrastructure bill. We call it voting no and taking the dough. Then they go home and they brag about the things they brought back to their communities when in fact they voted against people's interests. So I think that's part of it. And then I think the final thing is that there are still many challenges. And I think that the failure to be able to pass universal pre-K and childcare so far because of the Senate, not because of the House, not because of progressives, but because of the Senate, the failure to take action on climate change so far is something that people across the country are watching. And I think it's why we do have to do what the president laid out in his speech to the State of the Union. We have to deliver on things that are going to cut costs for Americans across the country, cutting the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, cutting the cost of childcare, taking action on climate.
Do you think he's just not tooting his own horn enough? Is that part of the problem? I mean, you look at Trump, who never stopped tooting his horn, whether it was factually accurate what he was saying or not. Do Americans just want a president who brags, regardless of whether he or she is bragging factually?
Well, hopefully we're all going to brag factually, but I take your point. I mean, I do think that the president needs to be out there tooting his own horn, tooting our horn in terms of Democrats and what we've been able to achieve. All of us need to do that. And I think sometimes what happens is that the 24/7 news cycle is such that people only want to focus on the things that are bad, what divisions are happening, what Democrats are fighting with other Democrats, versus actually talking about the really incredible things we have achieved in just 1 year in very, very difficult circumstances. And so that's why whenever I go on the air, I have my spiel about what we've gotten done, because I think people really do need to know that. But we also, Bonnie, do have to recognize that things are hard. Even as we've created all of these amazing gains from a year ago, we still have a lot of people who don't have health insurance. We still have a lot of people who don't have money in their pockets. The cost, when I hear about inflation from my constituents, what I'm hearing about is the cost of housing, the cost of childcare going up, the incredible increases. And that's why whatever we want to call it, I don't have to call it Build Back Better. It doesn't have to be the same as what we passed in the House, but we do need to take action to bring those costs down for people so they wake up feeling differently in the morning about their livelihoods and their opportunities.
I just heard an activist the other day, and I suppose complaining is the right term to use, about the fact that President Biden did campaign on getting more comprehensive gun control legislation approved, and he hasn't done that. Well, we're in the middle of a war. Some unemployment reports that came out were very good for the president. They didn't even get much publicity because of the war. I would imagine lobbyists, activists on climate change feel the same way. What do you say to those people?
Well, Bonnie, I was an activist for 20 years before coming to Congress. And my belief is that activists actually know a lot more about what should be happening than we sometimes give them credit for. Why do we have a system in Congress where a minority of senators can block a bill from even coming to the floor by a majority of senators? That doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to activists. It's true that it's the reality. It's true that the filibuster exists. But I think that for a lot of people across the country, they look at us in Congress and they say, why can't you fix it? And so I think I have tried to explain to people that it is really important for them to, first of all, to keep up their activism and to stay bold and hopeful about what we can get done, and that we need to have bigger majorities in order to even accomplish the changes to process and procedure that will allow us to get some of these things done. But I will also say that, we do have majorities in the Senate, in the House, and we have the White House. And it is very frustrating to see these urgent problems and things where the vast majority of the country, Republicans, Independents, and Democrats, agree. Gun violence is one of those things where it isn't just a Democratic issue. It is a bipartisan issue across the country. But then you come to Congress and the influence of big money in politics and the NRA and the hold that they have on Republicans and even recently on some Democrats is very, very frustrating. So I say to activists, listen, nothing that was ever worthy of fighting for and getting in terms of real change happened overnight. And if it were easy, it would have been done. So don't give up. Just help us to keep pushing.
What do you expect to happen in the midterms if history's any guide? the Democrats are probably going to lose both chambers.
Well, I absolutely don't think that we have to lose both chambers at all. I always laugh about the fact that Republicans lose elections and then claim they've won. Democrats win elections, and then we talk about how we've lost before we've even run in the election. I know the people that are running in swing districts across this country, and they are fantastic candidates. You know, a lot of people who really know their districts, know their constituents, and I believe they can win. And I think it's up to us to make sure that we continue to tell the country about what great candidates we have, and that history doesn't have to be repeated again. That is true that it's happened in the past. It's true that it's a tough time, but I really do believe we can win. And I think we have to start believing that we can win and not acting like we've already lost. And so I'm out there campaigning. I'm going into swing districts. I'm helping to raise money for candidates on the front lines. And of course, we have incredible progressive candidates across the country that are running that I'm looking forward to welcoming to the House.
You mentioned the executive orders, which of course former President Trump used a lot, quite a bit, to overturn laws on the environment. I mean, you name it. And why don't we see President Biden using it more often?
Well, actually, he has, but this is another one where I don't know that we've, touted this as much. Just as an example, a $15 minimum wage for federal contractors that is going into effect. We have had a whole series of executive orders around antitrust, around racial justice, and the people that the president has brought into some of these agencies. These are people who can use the executive authority to bring down costs, and they already have. President Biden has also done executive orders around the loan forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness program, which allows people across the country to cancel their debt and to get their debt paid off. And so I think that there are a number of executive orders he's taken. We've put together a list of a number of other things like, using march-in rights to bring down the cost of pharmaceutical drugs. If we're not able to pass legislation, this is a very good way to go about it. Canceling student debt, obviously, I've mentioned. Raising the overtime threshold, which would benefit millions and millions of workers across this country. So I'm excited about those things that we can do, as well as, of course, legislation. And I should mention that just yesterday, we signed into law, President Biden signed into law, the Ending Forced Arbitration Bill, which will end forced arbitration in cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And there are 60 million people with employment contracts who are affected by this, as well as those who sign service contracts like with Lyft and Uber and other such apps, where no longer will women be forced into forced arbitration and silence, and they will be able to choose how they want to proceed on their cases, and they will have a day in court if they want it. And I think it's a really, really big deal. It will affect the lives of millions of women across this country.
You mentioned climate change. Let's talk about that for a moment. What has the president done and what needs to be done? It truly is the most pressing issue. I mean, not, of course, while Russia is invading the Ukraine, but overall, over time, it's certainly the most important, because if the climate continues to deteriorate and the earth continues to warm, there aren't going to be any other issues, and once the climate becomes uninhabitable.
Yes, and even the Ukraine crisis shows us once again how important it is for us to wean ourselves from oil and gas that is essentially makes us dependent on dictators like Vladimir Putin. What we need to do is transition to renewable energy and get away from fossil fuels. And to me, this is the clearest example of why we shouldn't be held hostage by a dictator to those fossil fuels. So we do need to make this transition. The IPCC report just came out on the state of the planet. And it is terrifying. Even in Seattle, my home area, they're predicting a significant rise in sea level just in the next couple of decades, which really could put a lot of our district on the coast underwater. And so I think it is absolutely essential that we address the climate crisis. The president has taken a number of steps, and we are beginning to see certainly the investments of the infrastructure bill into the EV charging network, moving to electrification of the grid. Those things are important, but the biggest push is to bring down the carbon emissions. And to do that, we need to make significant investments. That's what the $500 billion that was in the Build Back Better Act was designed to do. So there are ways administratively, and we'll be outlining these, that the president can quickly try to bring down carbon emissions. Certainly the transportation sector and the work that we do with the infrastructure bill to make sure that we are encouraging mass transit and things like that will help. But there's a lot more that has to be done in the standard setting arena. And that can be done administratively. And then we need to really make this transition to renewable energy. And that is going to require investment.
Do you think that transition can come in time?
Well, I think we're already very late, but I do think that we can still make a dramatic impact if we act quickly.
Dramatic impact, is that going to be enough to I read scientific reports saying that even if we stopped all CO2 emissions now, climate change would what's been set in motion already would continue to make sea levels rise, continue to intensify storms to the point where more and more and more people will die because of hurricanes and tornadoes and whatever else, and make large chunks of the globe uninhabitable. I remember the United Nations report on climate change about 15 years ago came up with the term climate migrants and climate migration because, for example, there were along the Indian Ocean, large swaths of Bangladesh and India have become uninhabitable because they were shorelines before and now they're underwater. And that is happening all over the planet for different reasons: fires, rising sea levels, floods, et cetera, et cetera. So do you really think that there's time?
Well, I don't think that we can throw our hands up and say there's no time. I think we're late. And I think the impacts that you're describing are exactly the reason why we have to act with urgency. And I think we can make a dramatic impact on reducing climate migration, reducing deaths, reducing the effects of these devastating natural disasters that we're seeing all over the place. I just think there is no other option but to act. We can't say it's too late. There's still plenty that we can save. There's lives to be saved. There's homes to be saved. There's health to be saved. There's so many things we can still do. And I just don't believe that too late is something that we should even allow ourselves to think about. We should use it to push for urgent action right now.
One issue we haven't touched much on yet is immigration. There are still, because of the bans on Muslim immigration that former President Trump put in place, there are still families who were separated by that, who have not been able to reunite. There are other problems, obviously, with the immigration system. How do you see that changing and when?
Well, this is something I've spent 20 years on before coming to Congress. And so I've been working on immigration justice for a long time. And the need to reform the immigration system has never been more clear. And I think that while we have taken some steps to reverse some of the things that President Trump put in place cruel, awful things around caging kids and the Muslim ban, as you mentioned, but also the destruction of many of the agencies, the citizenship agency, many other things. We're taking some steps to change some of that, but in my opinion, we're not doing enough. And I really believe that we can, for example, one of the things that the administration can do, they can ban private for-profit detention centers. We have urged them to do that. There is no reason that jailing people should be a for-profit endeavor where the profits drive whether or not somebody is incarcerated. Most of the people that are in immigration detention are there waiting for a bond hearing. They have not been convicted of a crime at all. And so there's a very small percentage of people that have. And so I think there are alternatives to detention that are far more efficient and also cost effective for taxpayers. But the most important thing, Bonnie, and unfortunately, this is not something that can be done through executive action. It has to be done through legislation. We need to fix our broken immigration system. We do not have a way to actually have people who have lived in this country for 20 years, who have picked vegetables for us, put fruits on the table, cleaned our hotel rooms, have done so much care work for us. And yet they're still here in undocumented status, living in the shadows. There is no line for them to get into. We actually need to reform the immigration system. We need to provide a pathway to citizenship for these individuals. We need to redo the family immigration system so that you don't wait 20 years even to get your child into the country when you are here as a legal resident. There are many pieces that we need to reform. And if we reformed that and we gave people pathways to entry, and we worked on the reasons, the root causes of migration in other countries, that is how we're ultimately going to solve this problem. But let's never forget that if all the immigrants in this country who are here, including those without status, were to stop working, this country would stop working. So it's on us to fix the immigration system and to actually provide a real pathway to citizenship and to family unity and reunification for tens of millions of people across this country.
But we talked about climate change earlier, and the fact that it's sort of a numbers game. I mean, the more part of it is getting off of fossil fuels, which are terrible for the climate, but part of it is also just cutting back use of energy generally, which means in very high carbon footprint countries like the United States, means having, at least not growing in terms of the number of people who live here and who become, when they come from other countries, become like the rest of us, very high carbon footprint individuals. So do you ever think about that impact?
That is an old and tired argument that people used to make about population somehow being negative for the environment, population growth, and therefore immigration being negative for the environment. That was put forward by a lot of people at the Conservative Federation for American Immigration Reform. They actually tried to move that platform at the Sierra Club. The way to deal with this problem is not to say we don't want more people consuming more and living with a big footprint. The way to deal with this problem is to say we are in a global community. The United States should be welcoming to immigrants from around the world. It's what our nature is. It's what our identity is. And we should cut our carbon footprint. The United States carbon footprint is enormous. You're right, compared to other countries. There's no reason it has to stay that way. That should not be the reason for us to not be a welcoming, generous country, when in fact it is immigrants who have built the United States, along with those who came over unwillingly on slave ships. So I think we need to think about our responsibility to the world as a country, but also to the people who are already here, and to those who need to come in. But that the connection to climate and carbon footprint, the answer there has to be, let's cut our carbon footprint, not let's keep people out.
All righty. Thank you so much for your time, Congresswoman Jayapal. That's it for this edition of To the Contrary. Let's keep the conversation going on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit our website, pbs.org/To the Contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next time.
Funding for To the Contrary provided by the E. Rhodes and Leona B. Carpenter Foundation, the Park Foundation, and the Charles A. Freoff Foundation.
For a transcript or to see an online version of this episode of To the Contrary, please visit our PBS website at pbs.org/To the Contrary.
Be more PBS.